Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Check Service Industry Podcast. I am Reyshan Parker, and if you have not yet, please go watch my television series Beyond the Check Worker Earner Edition, now streaming on Amazon and Fox's Tubi TV. Fox's Tubi TV, it's free TV. I have a fantastic guest today. She really cares about the service industry's money. She actually wrote a book entitled Tipped, which is the life-changing guide to financial freedom for waitresses, bartenders, strippers, and all other service industry professionals. She's come a long way in her life. She was once a homeless teen. Maybe she danced for some dollars, but she definitely did not graduate from college. And now she is a personal finance expert and money coach who spent 2 decades working in every imaginable position in the service industry. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Sloan. Hey, Barbara.
Hi, Reyshan. Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited.
Thanks for being here. You're doing a great service for the service industry.
I'm very passionate about it, so I'm really excited to have it out in the world now.
So obviously, you went through your own struggles throughout the service industry in life. Here is her book. It's like you should be doing. There's a tip jar on the front of it, and you should save those tips for the future. How should we do that?
So I think for me, I grew up low to middle income, didn't have a lot of financial literacy, didn't have a lot of financial modeling, and I got into the industry after a pretty tough childhood. And I got into the industry because it felt very easy, and I needed something easy at the time. I needed something quick. I needed something that would give me fast access to cash, and I needed something that allowed me to be myself. And so the service industry was like the perfect place for all of those things. And I hit the ground running, and I loved it. But what I noticed after 2 decades of working in the industry is that, I didn't really move the needle in terms of my own finances. And I got myself into a debt cycle many times. I remember using payday loans.
Oh, no, not the payday loans. Anything but the payday loans.
High interest credit card products. For me, the kind of a pivotal moment was 2013, 2014. I moved to New York City with my wife. I got 2 jobs when I moved to New York City. We had like $700 when we moved here too. But my first job was working as a bartender at Coyote Ugly. And then my second job was working on Wall Street for an unregulated firm. So it was part trading floor, part independent sales organization that was like loan sharking essentially. So that job was a huge education for me on the markets and on predatory lending and financial services. And it was such a toxic job. After 6 months and the third trader being shipped off to rehab, I was like, I got to go back to
Coyote
bars
Ugly.
And construction full time. Exactly. This is way too toxic. So I've always ran kind of 2 career paths in tandem. I've worked in construction and I've worked in the service industry. I like to say dirt in the day and dirty in the evening. And so I got a job at a construction company. I was employee number 4, and I was afforded the opportunity to grow with them. And they hired me to set up an HR department and to do their accounting and finance. Well, I had never knew what an HR department was. So I didn't know what a 401k was. I didn't know what a paid time off policy was.
None of that.
I didn't know.
None of that exists for servers or bartenders. We're like, what?
None of it exists.
My wife, when she started working for a hotel, she finally got all those things, and she was like, she wanted to take time off, and they're like, well, you won't reach your full time to get your benefits if you take that time off because you don't have enough paid vacation time. And she's like, I don't understand. What? What do you mean I can't take the time off? Because it's just like a whole nother world once, you can't just, because if you're a server or bartender, if you generally speaking, if you need time off, you can just take it, right?
Or switch shifts, find someone to cover you. Exactly. And so it was sort of in deep diving all of these benefits where I was like, oh, these support the financial lives of employees. Like for servers and people in the industry who work off of tips, one, you're starting off with federally $2.13 an hour as your minimum wage. right?
Yep.
So when you're claiming tips, your entire paycheck is eaten with
into the taxes.
with your claimings. Exactly. And then if you take a paid day off, even if your state requires you to give people paid time off, what most people don't understand, they'll be like, oh, everyone in our state gets paid time off. And it's like, sure, in theory, but for people in the service industry, one, that's $2.13 an hour, depending on their state. But two, their tips aren't included in a paid time off situation. So no one in the service industry really sees a real paid day off. And so when you are taking time off, you're starting behind the line again and not getting, you're starting up behind the gate.
Yep.
So same thing with health insurance and same thing with the pre-tax benefits like a 401k.
Or just getting to the full time. And a lot of restaurants will just make sure that all of their employees don't hit full time, right? So they keep all their servers under 30 hours to make sure that they don't ever have to offer them insurance, right? I've seen that so many times. Just like there's that close and the people coming in and the insurance is coming in. And it'll happen if everybody's working over 40 hours, but nobody got over 40 hours. And guess we're not getting insurance.
No insurance. Yeah. And so then it's just one medical bill, one slight emergency away from total financial collapse. Service industry. We age into the most economically disadvantaged people in the population. It's a huge problem.
So I think this falls into one of your fun titles in one of your chapters. You have one that's called My Fuck Up Funds.
My fuck up funds.
Your fuck up funds. And so that's just in case, you do something stupid or something fucks up. You got a story in here about getting your money stolen or lost.
I have a few stories in this book, but I lost a billfold full of money and I ended up, we've all been there where we've like set it down or left it in the bathroom or whatever. And it has all your money from your shift in it. It probably has the 10 top order that you haven't rung in yet. And all of your sales slips, your credit card receipts, everything. And you lose it. And I remember making the situation so much worse. I was mad at my manager. I was mad at my tables. I was mad at everyone in the restaurant except myself. I mean, I was mad at myself too, but I remember making the situation so much worse.
And even at that time, you had the foresight. You had already started saving for, just in case you fucked up at this point.
Well, this was sort of the situation where I was like, this is how it kind of was created. This situation happened. I was like, I need to be able to self-insure against these problems because I can't be acting like this at every single inconvenience or mistake. So it started out as just like a fuck up fund. And I remember the first time I used it was I dropped a really expensive bottle of wine. And I remember just being like, this is what my fuck up fund is for. Like not every restaurant's going to make you cover it, but some of them will. And I had it in case I needed it. And it gave me a lot of peace of mind. And so that was sort of me slowly starting to climb out of my own financial mistakes. And then in 2016, political climate was a lot. It was hard for me to like watch news or anything. So I did a social media and media blackout. And I just started like reading personal finance, soothing personal finance books, listening to personal finance. Yeah, no, I mean, compared to the media at the time, to the news, it was soothing. So I just started deep diving everything I could get my hands on. And I listened to probably 10,000 hours at this point of podcasts and books on tape and reading books. And I never saw anyone who looked like us, anyone who had spent decades in the industry and talking about how they managed their money, talking about how they built wealth. And I was like, this is a huge problem, right? It's the only time anyone in our industry sees anyone from financial services, it's in a really predatory way. And I was like, this has got to stop. Somebody's got to talk to these people about money. And I had a lot of imposter syndrome. And I was like, I can't possibly be the person to do this because I have no college, no credentials. And I made up all of these other excuses. I was like, oh, well, I've only worked in 6 or 7 states and I've only worked in, a dozen different roles in the industry instead of like all of the roles. And I think I remember listening to some other podcast where it was like, just write the book you wish you had had. And I'm like, well, I can do that.
And you did.
And I did. Yeah.
You did. I talk a lot about how servers, it's an easy come, easy go industry, right? The service industry. We're used to making a lot of money, and they're used to spending a lot of money. And just the atmosphere of the service industry itself is, you made all that money. Well, let's go out after work, and now we're going to spend all the money. And so you might have made $300 that night. When you wake up in the morning, you had $20 left, right? And servers and bartenders do this repetitively, right? Go home, guys.
Yeah.
Go home. You just worked all night. Go home.
I mean, I think that for a lot of people in our industry, we feel shame about that, right? And we look at all of these other people in these other industries and we're like, oh, look how responsible they are. But it's because they're in environments that are conducive to that level of responsibility. All of it, when you're in a corporate 9 to 5, not everyone's going out to the bar afterwards. So you don't have that pressure or that tension in the situation that you need to say no to. You don't have to rely on your, willpower in order to preserve your income for that day, because
avoid the peer pressure.
Yeah. So it's 10 times harder for people in this industry. I have 2 sections in the book that are all about environments and how you have to protect yourselves from the environments that you're in, because our environments are really challenging. But it's not just this industry. Every industry has occupational hazards. Ours are just unique to us, and we don't talk about them enough.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, when I started, I was a busser at like 15, but then I was a waiter at 18 in this like fancy restaurant, and I was making at the time like $500 a week, right? Like, and pulling in.
That's good money.
Back in 1996, it was. You're like, oh my God, I'm making $200 a night sometimes. Like, this is crazy. And, after that, there's just no going back to like a 9 to 5 or minimum wage, like it's when you can easily, regularly make $20 an hour, even back then, like, why would you ever go work somewhere else? Particularly if you're not, if you're not invested in your future, you're just, trying to make as much money as you can now, and you're going to spend it all as quickly as possible because that's just what you do. It was before TikTok, right? Before TikTok, before Instagram, before all of like the information has just been spread like wildfire, right? Like when we were growing up, there was nobody telling me what a whole life insurance was just on my phone, right? Like, oh my God, like I just learned.
No one warning you against a whole life insurance policy. No one telling you, please stay away from anyone who says the word whole life insurance policy.
Oh, really? I love whole life insurance. Why don't you like whole life insurance?
Because it combines 2 different priorities. It's combining investments and insurance. Insurance companies don't have any special stock market that they invest into. They're charging you a premium to have access to the same stock market that the rest of us already have access to. Plus, you don't need life insurance forever. You need life insurance for a short period of time. So why wouldn't you just buy life insurance for that short period of time?
Well, because you can start taking the money out of your whole life insurance within 10 years.
Because you're combining into 2 separate priorities. You're wanting it to work as an investment and as insurance. Most whole life insurance policies, I think, have a yield of like 3 or 4%, whereas the stock market averages, the historic average for the stock market in general is 10%.
And all right, so stock market, because, Robinhood changed the way that, I've noticed, during the bubble of 2020, everybody in the service industry was like on their phones with Robinhood all of a sudden, right? And everyone's like buying GMC, and it was like, no, guys, don't do it. But
Robinhood
it worked out for a lot of them, and not so good for most of them.
What they did that was awesome was, I think they democratized investing in a big way, and they helped people who had never invested before get more comfortable investing. I think Robinhood is great for your sandbox if you want to play with like picking a few stocks yourselves, but I just don't think that they're the place you want to keep like your big savings buckets, like your retirement and maybe some of your other buckets, because they're a relatively new company. They're not,
necessarily going to be there forever.
Yeah, and they have some policy issues that they need to work out, but I'm also not licensed to give financial advice. So again, these are just my opinions.
What's your opinion on good things for servers and bartenders to be saving up for to invest in?
Yeah, so I think one thing that I really like to point out, I do coaching as well for people in the service industry. And one of the things I always like to get people started with is something specifically for retirement, because that is where our industry falls short, is in saving for retirement. Most people retire with Social Security in mind, whereas our industry, one, we don't have a habit of understanding how much we make. And so we don't have a habit of claiming how much we make. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we are not eligible for the full Social Security benefits. And so we will be retiring to practically no benefits because of that process. And so I think people in our industry need to be more diligent about setting up systems for their retirement. And so if you're somebody who's on a W-2 at your restaurant, club, bar, salon, whatever, then you have access to what's called an IRA, individual retirement account, and you can have access to an either Roth or a traditional type of IRA. And then once you fill that bucket up, you have to move on to what's called a brokerage account, which is an after-tax investment account. And then for people in our industry who are on 1099s, which if you're on a 1099, don't complain about being on a 1099. I think 1099s are amazing ways for you to write off business expenses such as health insurance, your cell phone bill. Like, please don't tell your boss that they're being evil by keeping you as a 1099, because there's a lot of benefits to that. But you also have access to a solo 401k and other like entrepreneurial type of retirement accounts that you can put much more in than an IRA.
Would you ever recommend servers just LLCing themselves? Because I know a lot of people who do that. As far as the 1099s are even concerned, like if you're going to be 1099ing yourself in a way, it's better to go through an LLC than as your personal Social Security number.
I'm not a CPA, so I can't give that advice, but like I always did it as a sole prop, like through my social. So I think you should ask your CPA whether or not you even need to do an LLC. I think that really depends on how extensive you're going to get, whether you're trying to like run properties through that, or, I think if you're just writing off your insurance and your cell phone, you're probably fine. But again, this is like very specific to who you are, what you're doing, your situation. Yeah,
there's just lots of stupid little tricks and tips about that entire industry that's flourishing all over Instagram and TikTok. So
yeah, but don't take financial advice from people you hear over the internet. That includes me, but like also I've done years and years of research.
Well, that was the problem. That was the problem with consumer investing and Robinhood at the time was, people weren't really trained to do these things. They just all of a sudden were just like, oh my God, I guess the stock market just goes up. And then when the hard reality came, I know lots of people who lost tons of money because they just refused to listen to the fact that it's a bubble, or that, or do the opposite of whatever Kramer says. I know a guy who literally does the opposite of whatever Kramer does, and he's made millions. He just does whatever Kramer says. He does the exact opposite, and he's made millions.
That's an interesting perspective. Markets are usually pretty efficient, so it's interesting for either of those swings to get. Well, I mean,
it's been a crazy 4 years, right? And it's going to be an even longer next couple years. But but it for this entire new generation, just to see that all happen, because people who've done it for years are super used to the ups and downs, right? Mm-hmm. And the occasional deep corrections, right?
But I think that's what makes people in our industry really ideal candidates for investing, is that we're already used to the ups and downs with income. We're already used to the idea of a little bit of risk versus reward when it comes to knowing that our income is based on our performance. And so I think we're already primed for a little bit of that volatility. We're already primed for that long-term thinking of like, well, we'll get it on the next shift. We'll get it on the next shift. And that's how you have to be as an investor. You have to be like, you have to know that you're playing the long game. You have to know that if you just consistently keep putting money into the market over time, that your contributions are the biggest determinant of your success, not necessarily what the markets are doing. And as long as you're well diversified and you're buying a little bit of the whole market, then overall, yeah, you are gonna see trends that go along with the entire market, which is that it tends to go up on a long-term average.
Patience. Yeah. How do we teach
Patience.
them patience? Because, service industry people are not the most patient people. They make their money, they spend their money, but to think long
Yeah,
term and from such a young age, right? Because a lot of, the service industry's base is younger, right? 18 to like 25, 26.
there are two ways that people most commonly become millionaires in this country. The first is through their 401k, and the second is through their primary appreciation through their primary residence. And so if we think about the 401k and how we replicate that, the reason that Americans get wealthy through their 401k is because of automation. Because Sharon from HR gives you a form, you check a box, and you never have to think about it again. Again, that works against our industry because we have these fluctuating incomes and we can't make these consistent deposits that we can't think about. So for us, we have to figure out ways to automate that so that it's mindless for us, whether it's just like $50 comes out of my paycheck every single week into my brokerage account or into my IRA. We have to make it that automated for us so that we can do that consistently.
So I got Acorns for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Acorn's a great platform for like rounding up your purchases into your investments.
Or just choosing, because it has a different settings of like whether you want to invest in large tech companies or whether you want to be a little more safer, or picking like groups, and kind of like a 401k does, right? It just picks groups of different markets and holds your money in basically ETFs, right? It's basically its own form little ETF, right?
ETFs are great, but they're also, you can buy and sell ETFs. In the book, I have an investing chapter, and I love my investing chapter. It's my favorite one because if you understand what it's like to be at a bar, you will understand how to invest by the time you're done with this chapter. The entire chapter is an analogy to the bar. So I call ETFs something like, it's like being at a 24-hour diner. Like maybe you're not going to be making the best choices when you're selecting things at 3 a.m. And that's kind of ETFs, right? Like, because you can buy them and sell them whenever. And maybe that's just a little too much optionality for something that is going to be our retirement in 50 years. Maybe we shouldn't be making moves like that on something that needs like a very long-term approach. So I love Acorns. I think it's a great platform, but I'm a big fan of Vanguard personally. Vanguard is a co-op, and that's the reason I love them. So it's just like it's member owned. They're institutional. They've been around forever, and because they're member owned, like they give really low cost to a lot of their funds, and they have some of the lowest cost funds out there. Which means if it's a low cost expense ratio, more money is in your pocket. Like
the Vanguard, I just had a brain fart. The S&P, like Vanguard S&P.
Yeah, their S&P is great. It's a very low cost way to get into the S&P. Yep.
Touché.
Big fan. Big fan of them.
I want to hear more of these bar analogies. So like don't buy. Tell me you did something that has like, don't buy the whole bar around.
We do talk about. So this is actually a story that I talk about in the bar. Is like when people roll up to your bar and they drink, and then they're like, you know what? I'm tapped. I have no more money. I got to go home. You have to remember that they're spending what they have left over after all of these systems are in place. Their investing is automated. Their paid time off is automated. Their health insurance is automatically deducted. For people in the service industry, when you roll up to your bar after a shift, you're spending what you have, not what you have left over, because you have to put those systems in place after you receive your income. It requires another layer of like mental shifts for you to be able to deduct out all of those expenses and then say, oh, okay, maybe I should only spend like 10% of what I have left over. Or, it just requires you to be a more diligent budgeter.
I have noticed with direct deposits now, because, a lot of cash is shorter and shorter, and, everything's going more digital. People spend less cash. People carry less cash. And so a lot of servers, bartenders, et cetera, are actually receiving higher paychecks as opposed to walking away with cash. And so now with direct depositing, almost any direct deposit within your bank, you can set up to have it varied and pull percentages from your check into different accounts, right? So that's a good way.
It's definitely getting better.
to set up your automation is to break down your financial into percentages of what needs to go where before you ever even touch it. And so when it actually hits your bank account, then you only have what you have left to spend.
Yeah. For people who are in the spicier side of the service industry, I like to tell them to keep 2 separate bank accounts in case one of them gets shut down. But they have one bank account where they do transfers from. So like, let's say this works for anyone in the industry. Let's say that you funnel all of your money, whether you're making deposits or whatever, into one bank account. You can consistently pay yourself a even amount from that paycheck or from that bucket. So it feels like you're getting consistent income, and so that it will help you to be able to track and budget more easily. That's a thing that we often advise other business owners to do.
So pretend to be your own boss.
Yeah, you are your own boss, and you have to be a good steward over your income, just like you're an owner of your company.
Right. I mean, and today's day and age, and particularly with the recession coming, you have any just like little tips and tricks for people to just pull through the tough times?
Yeah, my favorite resource overall in all of the financial pillars and all of financial advice is the emergency fund. And that's in the fuck up fund, fuck you fund, all of the F funds chapter that I have. Your emergency fund should be 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. Your like bare bones living expenses. This is what I need to get by, keep me and my family safe.
For 3 months.
3 to 6 months.
3 to 6
yeah.
months.
3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. If you're just starting out, then aim for 3 months. If you have 3 months, then try to buffer it up to 6 months, because a recession it's a challenging time, right? People often pull back on luxury goods during a recession, and that does include going out. Typically, though, in recession, we don't see a reduction in people going to the bar. Alcohol industry does very well during recessions. So if you are somebody who's maybe you're at a diner, a way to protect yourself during a recession would be to find an establishment that has a liquor license, has a full liquor license. Maybe you're somewhere with just like beer and wine. Maybe that means that you move to somewhere with a full liquor license. Lots of bar seats.
Always recommend it, but my God, have you noticed how expensive drinks are nowadays?
Drinks are very expensive.
Just in the last 2 months, it is an impressive amount. All right, I'm not sure how old you are, and I'm not going to ask, but when I first started going, I worked
in the industry for over 2 decades, so I've seen some things.
When I went to the bars, started going to bars, you could go and get a beer for $2. Like a shot of whiskey was like maybe $3, right? And
I remember 50-cent drafts.
I remember 50-cent drafts. I remember power hours where you'd pay like $2 and you could drink whatever you wanted for like an hour, which was college. That was good old college.
Yeah.
At like 5 p.m. too, right? Like that's what power hour was.
We're a bunch of old timers. Like, man, inflation has really hit our industry.
I remember when I had to dial the old rotary to get number 0. Oh man, that was a pain in the butt. It was, you had to wait.
I used to have to write my orders down on my paper.
Now everyone's walking around with their pads connected to Toast, and people even just order from their phones at their table, and then someone brings the food,
Yeah.
right? Like,
but yeah, I totally recommend if you don't have an emergency fund, get an emergency fund, 3 or 6 months worth of living expenses. There's a few ways that you can do this. I like to make it a game. If you don't have a emergency fund, then maybe you want to create some sort of fun way to focus on that savings. I always like to do like some sort of challenge. Like if you're a server and you have like a 6-table section, make one of your tables your emergency fund table. No matter what tips you get from that table, that's going into your emergency fund. Or if you have a bar, pick a couple of seats, like whatever those seats are, that goes into my emergency fund. If you're a dancer, maybe a specific bill type, maybe a person wearing a certain colored shirt. There's a lot of ways to gamify these things to make it fun, you know? And you're like,
all the guys with red shirts, that goes into my emergency fund.
And then those guys, the next time when they're like wearing a green shirt, they're like, why is the service not as good as the last time?
Because you're not going in my emergency fund unless you wear red, man.
Exactly. I mean, I think you're going to care about those tables a whole lot more when you realize that those tables are going into investments and that those tables' money are going to be paying you for the rest of your life. You know, it just takes on a whole different layer of meaning.
That's awesome. You have a lot of fun tips just in here too, like how to negotiate your hourly salary. Like, do you think that we as servers or bartenders can ever get a raise?
It's so interesting, but I do think that, you know, we're seeing a lot more establishments go to like a tip share. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're somebody you're on a heavy lifting shift, like, then there's no way for you to be recognized for pulling the heavier labored shifts than to talk to your manager about increasing your hourly. They are not required to stick to the sub-minimum federal wage or even the state sub-minimum wage. They have the option to pay you more if they want to. It's on us to advocate for ourselves. So I always like to tell people to do a year-end review. Like, our industry doesn't give reviews. You have to make your own. So write all of the things that you've done awesome throughout the year. Like, remember when I picked up for those 2 parties last minute? Remember when I, reorganized the side work lists for, all of the servers? Remember when I, a list
Remember
of
when
all
I
the
did
things
all
that
that
show your value?
managerial work that I wasn't being paid for?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you can encourage them, like, maybe there's not a lead position in your establishment. You can be like, hey, I'm kind of running lead here. Maybe there's a way for me to be compensated for that. Yeah, I make your life easier. Maybe there's a way for you to show that support to me.
I mean, if you're a good employee and you want to keep the good, you like your job, you want to stay at your job, I don't think there's anything wrong with, asking for the raise. But what happens when you are that star employee, you ask for the raise, and they just don't even care. Because that's the majority of service, and you're right about adding leads or a head server, head bartender, right? Like, give me some sort of managerial position to make the excuse for giving me more money because I'm already doing it. You just
If the manager doesn't have the ability to give you more money and they maybe feel bad about that and they want to keep you, then maybe they'll show it in other ways. Maybe they will give you preferred sections. Maybe they will give you first on for certain shifts. Maybe they will, maybe they'll cut you early if you need it.
Then the other servers get mad at you. I'm like, why does she get all the table? It's such a messed up industry. But the
thing is, it's not going anywhere. There's over 5.5 million people working on a tip-based income. We're not changing this,
No, and truth be told, the majority of servers would never want to be put on hourly. Like in America, sure, there's the history of the way that tipping was designed, and yet it is basically slavery. But at the end of the day, I trust other human beings to give me more money than I trust companies to give me. Because weirdly, a good 50% of people actually give a shit, right, about their service and care and understand the hard work that it actually is. I think everybody should have to be in the service industry or the military for like a year, right?
I totally agree. But I also think if we look back to the history of tipping, railroad workers used to be on tips as well. And, they went on strike and they got their minimum wage and they got their benefits. But like, when's the last time you had a really great time on a train with a train employee? Like, our industry needs to be motivated and incentivized with that tip, because that's what keeps it fun and engaging. If I didn't have to if I knew that my performance was not, based on my tip, I would not care as much about being as engaging. I wouldn't be trying as hard to raise the energy of the establishment that I'm in. I wouldn't be trying as hard to, make the connection between the two single lonely hearts, or, finding out what this guy and this guy do for a living and what they have in common and how they could talk at the bar. And like, it just wouldn't be the same. I wouldn't be as motivated.
So there's a lot of places in Oregon, and a couple places around the country that have gone into like this co-op format where the tip is actually included into the price of the entrees and the cocktails and everything else. So they basically just raised everything by 20%. And then that all comes off and is shared amongst all the employees, right? So they're all basically owners. And so they share all the profit at the end of every month. But on top of that, everyone gets their base hourly pay, plus the cooks, the bartender, everybody's just, and they have to rotate positions. So not everybody is just a bartender or a cook. They all have to share the positions throughout the week. And so nobody ever feels slighted that, they only, because the bartender is pulling in all the money, right? And so they're being the friendly one. They're being the person who can, gets that $100 tip, right? And the cooks are back there cooking, sweating their happy asses off. Basically, it's miserable. Like,
that's so fun.
A kitchen is miserable. But like, and that is probably one of the hardest jobs in the restaurant, is back there. You're in the weeds. You got 50 fucking tickets, and you're trying to get all those steaks correct. You're trying to get all the hamburgers cooked. You're just trying to get everything right. And it's just insane. And they're back there making, $12 an hour, and you're in the front, walking out with 30. And so I've never understood. I mean, because you have to love cooking, right? You have to love cooking. To put up with that for years is how it's been. And now a lot of restaurants have gone to tip pools where they're including the cooks.
Yeah, but I will also say those
servers get mad.
The chefs are guarded from the general public, and the general public is awful. I like to say, like, go on any Facebook thread, read the comments of a Facebook post, and that is what your bar is full of. Like, you are managing so many different personalities. You are shouldering and shielding a lot of strange requests, strange statements, chips at your confidence, at who you are. I mean, it's a battlefield out there with the general public.
Oh yeah, you can't let them affect you, right? Like, there's just no. And for starting servers, the girls crying in the back because the table was mean to them, or
boundaries are so important in this industry, and it's definitely something you have to develop if you're going to make it long term.
I just don't. I became very just callous. Not callous in like a mean way, just callous in like, I don't care what you say or do. Like, you're not going to affect my day. It's more of just being above the rest of it, or above anybody's attitude. Like, just maintain your positivity, pat yourself on the back at the end of the day. Make sure that you are aware that you did the best job that you could do, and otherwise, fuck them. Right?
Yeah.
I don't fucking care.
And this goes back to the emergency fund, and why it's so awesome is because for people in the service industry, you do have that power imbalance where people are constantly asking you to do things, or to, they will say whatever they want and think that they can totally get away with it. And when you have an emergency fund, when you have enough savings to know that you can walk away from a job, so that you can keep yourself safe, so that you can say no to certain requests that feel off limits, so that you can just be like, you know what, even if you have a toxic manager, or, a terrible boss who's putting you in unsafe or uncool situations, that you have the ability to walk away.
Or just won't give you that raise you deserve. You can go get it somewhere else. You have the time.
Right now it's an employee's market. I don't know what it'll be next year, but
I mean, it is amazing to me that we actually do have the shortage that we have, because it is one of the most easiest money making professions for just the general public to have, is the service industry. And yet we have this huge major shortage for servers and bartenders, just straight up.
I think we think it's easy also because we've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
There are, and this is a
Yeah.
poor feature on the industry as well, is that we don't realize how skilled we are. We are super skilled at our communication skills, our ability to manage time, our ability to understand the rotation and the shifts that are happening across like 3 different levels of an establishment. Like, we're very skilled, and we don't realize, for people who either aren't skilled or aren't trained, or maybe don't have that craft side to them, like maybe this industry is just not for them, that it's not easy.
When you went for your other jobs on Wall Street, did you put your service history on your resume?
Oh, 100%. I run a business now. I own a construction company here in Manhattan, and everything that I learned about business, I learned in the service industry. Like, you are well prepared to run a business in the service industry. You are the beginning, middle, and end of every transaction. You're constantly doing back of the envelope math. You are managing lots of different types of personalities. A lot of times in the industry, you're opening and closing for people. You know, I mean, you're having to be responsible for a lot of things. You're having to apologize. You're having to smooth things out. You're having to fix problems. I mean, you learn so many skills in this industry. I think anyone who's trying to hire someone should hire someone in the industry.
Right? I feel like employers, maybe more so now, but back in the day, didn't look at that from the light that you just shone on it, which is that, yeah, multi-talented profession, right? Like organization, personality, problem-solving skills, de-escalation skills, right? Like,
Exactly.
de-escalation more so in the bars than the other clubs, but you got that one guy whose just state came out wrong 3 times, and he is about to flip the table over.
Yeah, and we work across a lot of different establishments that also hone our skills in different ways. Like, if you work at a sports bar or something, like, you learn volume. You learn how to do things quickly. Whereas if you're working at a dive bar, you really learn interpersonal skills, like, because it's a slower pace. You're having to connect more with people. You're having a lot of engagement, a lot of conversation. Fine dining, you have none of that conversation. You're having a lot more of the points of service. And, you know, so it's really, even as we switch establishments throughout our careers, we're honing many different skills.
You hear that, employers? Hire ex-service industry people. They're tired of waiting on you. They want to work for you, and they're highly skilled.
And they're ready for some benefits.
And they're ready for some bennies, man.
Yeah.
And their bennies and their 4Ks. Where can we go get your book?
Oh, yeah. So the book's available on Amazon. I think you can just type in tipped or tipped book, and you should be able to find it pretty quickly. I also do one-on-one coaching. I'll do money talks. If you have a bar, a club, a restaurant, somewhere you want to send me to talk to your staff, I truly believe that when more people in the industry are more able to look after their money, when they have more strong financial foundations, they become better employees, they become happier, healthier humans. And so I'm happy to come talk to your staff if you have an establishment.
What about the owners? What can the owners do to improve their employees' financial futures from as a restaurant, as a bar, as a strip club, as a can they make changes? Can you ever advise them? That's such a great question. Right?
You're the first person that's ever asked me that.
Really?
And I'm so thrilled that you just asked me that. I think owners can definitely make changes, have conversations about, bring me for a talk to your staff. That's what you can do, is help educate them on financial literacy so that they can be protecting the money that they're making. Our industry has such high turnover, and that turnover comes from a few different things. Let's say you had a shitty shift or you only made $30 in a week. If you didn't have that emergency fund, you can't ride out certain storms. You're just like, screw this job. I'm not making enough money anymore. I need to find something else. We also get super burnt out because we don't have time off. And so I think establishments could implement, like, you know, maybe talking more about how they can structure taking time off to help their employees avoid burnout.
I'm a huge fan, and obviously the service industries can go both ways on this, but just the 3-day work week, huge fan. So I would rather work 3 doubles and just be done for the week, like 12 hours, 12 hours, 12 hours, and I don't have to work for 4 days. And, you know, nurses' schedules, firefighter schedules, you get a lot of free time because, you know, you have to wake up, you go to work, you're there for 8 hours, but if you're there for 4 more hours, you get days off, right? So, and Chick-fil-A just did that too. So they just implemented, I think the 3-day work week for their employees if they want, which is
I'm a big fan. And if you're investing in a way where you know that eventually your investments will be able to provide you a portion of your income, like I'm a part of this community called the Financial Independence Retire Early community. And it's always people talking about how they can retire early or become work optional or work part-time. If you had given me my book at the age of 20, I would already be retired by now. I would already be totally financially independent from the service industry and able to work 2-3 days a week. And I think that, you know, our industry has a lot of possibility.
It does. One last question. And so owning a home, right? You want to be able to buy the home. You need to work the job for 2 years. You need to claim all that money so you can actually buy the house. How important is that?
It's important because, I mean, that's how a lot of people in this country build their wealth, is through their primary residence. And so you have to claim all of your income in order to qualify for traditional lending. If you're not claiming all of your income, then you're going to fall prey to predatory rates and you're going to be paying twice as much for your house as everyone else on your block. And that's not building wealth, right? That's making payments.
Right. Same with rent, right? Your rent is sometimes higher than what your mortgage would be. It's just that you don't have the ability to be approved for the things that you need to, even though you're going to spend more money, they still won't get right. So
my advice for people who are interested in potentially getting into homeownership is to start going to open houses. Even if you're just starting to claim your tips, even if you're just starting to get your credit in a good position, go to open houses, talk to brokers, talk to lenders, find out what it's going to take. Just the more you start putting yourself in positions like that, the more you start to realize, like, it's possible for me. You'll start to see how that path can form, and you'll be accountable to yourself, and you'll start claiming your income and saving your down payment and knowing how to get there.
And one day you will be a homeowner too. Service industry people, you too can own homes. Just be patient. Awesome. All right, Barbara, where can we follow you at or find you?
Please follow me at Tipped Finance. I'm on all the socials. I hang out mostly on Instagram, so that's at Tipped Finance. I'm trying to start TikTok. That is not a young person, or that is not an old person's game.
Just take all your Instagrams and put them on TikTok. It's fine.
Yeah, right. So at Tipped Finance on the socials. If you're interested in getting in touch with me, I love to see industry people win. So like, if you have some financial wins, please email me those. I love to shout them out for the rest of the community. I don't think our industry does a really great job of modeling. We're all super comfortable talking about income, but we just kind of stop the conversation there and we don't talk about all of our great money management stuff. So if you have a win, shoot me a win. I'm happy to post it to the rest of the community. www.tippedfinance.com. And I'm Barbara at tippedfinance.com.
Make sure to send over those questions and stories because I want to read them too. How are you doing out there? Are you succeeding in maintaining your own financial freedom in the service industry? Let us know. Awesome. Barbara, thank you again so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, go get tipped and find out how you can secure your financial future as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And Barbara Sloan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reyshan. This was really fun.
Thanks for being here. We'll do it again sometime. And I'm totally going to pass this around to everybody in Savannah because they definitely need to read this. This is, the easiest, funnest way to really understand what's going on and what you can do about your financial life. So, awesome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thanks for being here. And everyone, go watch my TV show. Cheers.
Yeah, so good.